Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of History Before Us, and I am here in Camp Nelson in Nicholasville, Kentucky. Did I get that right, Steve?
That's right.
All right, good stuff. I'm here with my man, Steve. And the thing is, me and this brother have been communicating for years.
Is this the first time we've met in person?
In person. It's the
oh
first
my
time.
gosh.
Done some YouTube interviews.
That's right.
No, it was Instagram.
Instagram, that's right.
During the pandemic, of course, when everything shut down. And you were elsewhere before you came to
I was in
Kentucky.
D.C. at the Civil War Defenses of Washington working for the Park Service. And then I get this text message around 10 o'clock last night. It's like, are you in Lexington? I'm like, yeah, I'm in Lexington. And my friend Frederick told me he's in town.
Yep.
I own some of your merch. You know this.
Yeah, the Peace, Love, and History shirt.
That's right.
Yep.
So, I've been out at Camp Nelson since 2021. And it's one of the newest units of the Park Service. That's why I'm here. So
most definitely. And this is impromptu, you all. We were just supposed to come and link up and just chop it up. I didn't expect to interview him, but he's such a dope guy, and this is going to be abbreviated.
Yeah.
But that just means you need to come out here to the site itself and get the full tour. So we're inside first, and then we'll take a look at some things outside.
So we're in the visitor center here at Camp Nelson National Monument. It's one of the newest units of the National Park Service, established in October of 2018. But it's really only been since 2021 when permanent NPS staff have been on the ground, myself included. As I mentioned, I came out here in 2021, first for about 4 months, and then permanently in September 2021 from Washington, D.C.
Nice.
And this is one of the most complex, powerful Civil War, forced civil rights sites in the entire country.
Man, I like how you said that.
Yeah, Civil War. So, one of the themes the Park Service used to have for the 150th of the Civil War from 2011 to 2015 was Civil War to civil rights. So 1860s to 1960s. And I thought that was kind of inaccurate, actually.
Okay.
So I've reframed it as Civil War for civil rights.
Nice.
And we're in the central bluegrass.
Mm-hmm.
During the Civil War, Kentucky was a loyal slave state known as a border state. Camp Nelson is this large Army supply depot and recruitment center, and it becomes one of the largest liberation centers for African Americans in the entire country. So over 10,000 African American men, mostly enslaved, will join the U.S. Army here and will join the U.S. colored troops. And they'll be joined by their families as well, who are actually called refugees. So freedom seekers escaping slavery will make their way to Camp Nelson. And by March of 1865, many of these people will be free themselves as well. So
let me ask you this. Being that we're so close to Ohio.
Yes.
And do you feel that the odds of individuals who were refugees, liberation seekers, being here in this part of Kentucky would have been a better chance for them to advance in freedom versus being in the lower South, such as Alabama, Mississippi? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
It depends.
Okay.
I think during the Civil War, when enslaved people were close to the U.S. Army, they might have a better chance of self-determination, self-emancipation, as we call it. Camp Nelson is a mix of triumph and tragedy. So by 1864, the Army is authorizing the enlistment of African-American men. As I said, the majority of these men will be enslaved. When they join the U.S. colored troops, they free themselves. Yeah. But that is not the case for their families and other men who are unable to enlist. So thousands of freedom seekers come into places like Camp Nelson. They're called refugees, and the Army will not enlist them. And on eight separate occasions in 1864, the Army will forcibly remove or expel Black refugees, including the wives and children of their soldiers. It's absolutely brutal and horrific. November 23rd, 1864, over 400 Black refugees are expelled from Camp Nelson and over 100 die.
Wow.
I guess we'd use the term, Frederick, it went viral. Went out east, Eastern newspapers published this horrific event. It reached the halls of Congress, and it did inspire change.
Okay.
So in March of 1865, believe it or not, the Army, the War Department, the federal government, they established the Home for Colored Refugees at Camp Nelson, which provides housing, it provides school, there's a church there, there are government offices and support for these refugees. And on March 3rd, 1865, and this is a result of the November expulsion, Congress will pass legislation which emancipates the wives and children of Black soldiers.
Oh, wow. That's dope.
So, Camp Nelson continues, including now, this 150 years ago, in late May of 1865, the Army continues to enlist Black men here because it helps free their families.
Well, let me ask you this, and maybe we can walk around just a little bit.
Yeah, please join us.
So let me ask you this. Were the folks coming from smaller rural communities in Kentucky, in Tennessee, and places like that? You know, Indiana is right across the border too. So I mean, that's a
It's
free
actually
state.
kind of a mix. There are people that are coming from all over the bluegrass. We're in the central bluegrass area. Just up the road is Lexington, about 14 or 15 miles. But thousands of people are coming to this area. There are 8 recruitment centers for African American soldiers in the state. Camp Nelson is the largest, as I mentioned, over 10,000 men. By far the largest in the state, the 3rd largest in the country, after Camp William Penn in Philadelphia and New Orleans, Louisiana. But think about this. Those places started recruiting in 1863. This started in 1864. But African Americans did not wait until the Army allowed them to enlist in Kentucky. So you're talking about Indiana, Ohio.
Right.
Black Kentuckians left the state to join the Army. So they went up to Ohio, they went to Indiana, they even went to Tennessee. And we were just talking about this before we went on camera. Probably one of the most prominent Black Kentuckians that left the state to join the military is Gabriel Young, the father of Charles Young.
Okay.
So from Mays Lick, Kentucky, instead of going to Camp Nelson, he could have gone to Louisville, he could have gone to Covington, Kentucky. He crosses the Ohio River and enlists in Ohio, actually. Joins the 5th U.S. Colored Heavy Artillery. So you see this range here. By the end of the Civil War, 23,703 Black men joined the Army in Kentucky. If you add the men that left the state to join other regiments, it's probably closer to 30,000. So this would be the highest number likely of all the states in the entire country.
So I see that there's a timeline here. What are some things that kind of stand out to you
that's a great question.
on the timeline?
One of the questions we get a lot from visitors or comments when they come into the Visitors Center is, was Kentucky a Confederate state? Or I think Kentucky's a Confederate state. And it actually wasn't. You know, with the start of the Civil War in April of 1861, the state was actually neutral for a little part of the summer. And then it declares allegiance to the United States in the late summer of 1861. And we call it conditional unionism. So the state of Kentucky believes that the best way to preserve the institution of slavery is to stay in the Union. And that's why federal policies, military and like congressional policies will not impact the state. So like the Emancipation Proclamation, the First and Second Confiscation Acts, they do not impact the state directly. But if you think about the Emancipation Proclamation, I think a lot of us know about that, January 1st, 1863. It also authorizes the enlistment of African American men in the Army and the Navy. And so that's indirectly what will impact what happens here, because as I mentioned, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Tennessee, these regiments will start to form and men will leave the state. And I think this is important as well, my friend. We're going to get close to June, right? It's like, what? It's May 23rd?
It's right around the corner.
Juneteenth is coming up, right? And that's the Army enforcing the Emancipation Proclamation. We always tell people slavery is still legal here after Juneteenth. So if you are not a man that can join the Army, and you know, as I mentioned, that March 3rd order, which will emancipate the wives and children of Black soldiers, there are still enslaved people in the state in July, August, September, October, November of 1865. Slavery is finally abolished in Kentucky on December 6, 1865, with ratification of the 13th Amendment. And this is the one that on the timeline as well. Come over to this, my friend. Look at that.
1976.
Yes, and so people are like, "Is that is that a typo?" They're like, "Did you mean 1876?" No, 1976. So obviously, in December of 1865, the state will not ratify the 13th Amendment because of what happened here during the Civil War, basically emancipation. And you know, it takes obviously 3/4 of the state to ratify an amendment. So that just shows you the depths of this. We're in the hallway that leads into the museum here.
And this is where we're at.
So you know, these are some of the fortifications that was constructed to defend Camp Nelson during the war. And what's really interesting about this, Frederick, is this shows you the complexities of slavery and emancipation in the state. Okay, because you might have heard the term of like contraband of war, and that did take place in states that were in rebellion. Kentucky, remember, is a loyal slave state. So in 1863, as the Army establishes Camp Nelson, they're going to build a system of fortifications to protect the northern approaches to Camp Nelson. We're kind of close to the White House and the barracks here. The Army needs labor, and instead of if they're in Virginia or if they're in Georgia or South Carolina or the Deep South, they can confiscate, right, enslaved people as property and get them to perform labor.
Yes.
That is not the case here.
And here, right here, I'm seeing home for
Yes,
for
which is, as I mentioned, established in
Yeah.
1865. We have about 7 acres on that side today.
Okay.
But
How many of these buildings still stand?
all gone. Yeah,
All gone.
we call it like a 3-year city. It comes up very, very quickly. And 1863 and 1866, everything is gone, right? There are some remnants left. Camp Nelson grew to over 4,000 acres. We have about 465 a part of the park today.
Okay.
But what's really interesting about this, if you look at this right here, in order to develop the fortification and road system, the Army will impress enslaved people, meaning they will pay the enslaver for use of their human property. And that's what happens here. Over 1,900 enslaved African Americans will be impressed to work for the Army. They're going to build fortifications.
That is a new term for me.
Yes, and that's the term they use, impressed. They impressed these people. As I mentioned, 1900, they built roads, they built fortifications. And what's really cool about this quartermaster record, they had to keep records, right? And then these people were returned in time for like the fall harvest. 1,900, that's a dramatic number. We have identified close to 100 men who later returned and joined the U.S. colored troops at Camp Nelson the following year. Yeah, so this is a really unique space. We're actually about to start a new museum enhancement plan, which will take about 12 to 18 months to do. We always give credit to Jessamine County, Kentucky, who used to manage this site. They did incredible work with very limited resources, Frederick. This goes chronologically with Camp Nelson. Yeah, from an Army supply depot, a recruitment center. It was also a hospital. As I mentioned, it grew to 4,000 acres. So it's called Camp Nelson, but it's really a military base or installation.
Okay.
And it evolves dramatically during the Civil War. So 63, big supply depot, a recruitment center for actually white soldiers, including East Tennessee men. In 1864, it becomes this center for black enlistment and freedom. In 64, into 65, a freedom center for enslaved people as well. So, one of the big components of this is the supply aspect that you can see. We want to show what this visually looks like for visitors. And thousands of men, horses. By the way, 300 wooden structures here.
300.
Over 300 built just like that within weeks, especially in the summer of 1863, to support the armies in the field. It's truly incredible what happened here.
Yeah.
And the legacy of it as well. That's a great question. There's a couple autobiographies by African-American soldiers that were here. Elijah Mars, who you're headed to Louisville.
Yeah.
Him and his brother are USCT soldiers, and they're co-founders of Simmons College in Louisville, which is an HBCU, which is incredible. There's another autobiography by a gentleman named Peter Bruner, and he talks about like his journey to Camp Nelson, enlisting in the Army. And apparently when he enlisted, the officer asked him what he wanted. He said, I want a gun and I want to go fight the rebels, right? Wow. And so really, really powerful accounts. We've got accounts, unfortunately, they're very, very vivid and dramatic and heartbreaking from Black soldiers. After the expulsion, the Army sent investigators in here to determine what happened. And they'll share accounts of their family members being expelled from Camp Nelson. But I guess it's important that critically important we have these perspectives, right?
Most definitely.
And that's one of the unique things about the Army is they're going to keep records, right? Including like court-martial records and things like that. And often that will be the first time you hear these Black voices. So yeah, this, as I mentioned, the county did a great job here. You see the chronology here, right? From supply to the depot to recruitment center. And check this out. This is one of my favorites. It shows you kind of the areas where these recruitment centers were established. And you can see Camp Nelson is right in the middle there. And they actually organized these recruiting stations off congressional districts, and because it will impact the federal draft and things like that. All the regiments that were formally organized in the state, there's like about 175 USCT regiments, over 20 of them were in Kentucky, and the ones with the stars were organized here, 8 of them.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot. And the big number always talk about, the number I'll remember for the rest of my life, 23,703, as you can see right there. second to Louisiana. Remember, as I mentioned, it started a year later.
Yeah.
And so if you think about men who left, probably 30,000. Here's another very prominent father of a very prominent African-American, Paul Lawrence Dunbar. His
Yeah.
father is from Kentucky.
Really?
And he'll joined.
Because he has a house in the Paul Lawrence Dunbar house is in Dayton.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
a part of Dayton Aviation, the national park site. And Paul and Charles Young were actually very close. And his father served with the 55th Massachusetts Infantry, the sister regiment of the famed 54th Massachusetts, which featured Frederick Douglass's son, which is in the film Glory, of course.
Yep.
And then he also served in the 5th Massachusetts Cav as well. Both of those are black regiments organized by the state of Massachusetts. But Paul is a USC, the son of a USCT veteran, just like Charles is. So we're actually working on. I think a lot of your followers may have read the Colored Soldier's poem that Paul Lawrence Dunbar writes. We're working on a new exhibit which will feature that poem.
Nice. So I see this over here. Real quick, are these names that are these? Yeah. So these names are associated with Camp Nelson.
Yes, as I mentioned, Elijah Mars is the gentleman that helped establish, co-founder of Berea College. Peter Bruner is the gentleman that rode A Slave's Adventures Towards Freedom. And there are a couple other soldiers as well. One that we talk about particularly a lot is Samuel Trueheart, which he actually kind of lived close to Louisville, makes his way down to Camp Nelson.
Okay.
Look at that image, by the way.
Yeah.
It's owned by David Brown, and David Brown happens to be his great-great-grandson, who actually lives in Maryland now. Wow. David's become a close friend of the park, and I'll share this with him. He'll appreciate it.
Yeah, most definitely, man.
It's one of those stories you hear all the time, right? He's like, I went up to the attic, I opened this box, and he just started he found his original tintype, a photo of him older with looked like his wife and children. It was his family. By the way, Samuel is an exoduster. Makes his way out to Kansas. Over 5,000 Black Kentuckians journeyed to Kansas after the Civil War because of all the violence and things that are happening here. After the Civil War, David told me, by the way, that the family still owns the 60-acre plot.
Dang, that's tight.
Multiple generations later, and it was incredible. It's one of my favorite stories because it shows you this living legacy, right?
For sure.
And they've kept it in the family as a way to honor Samuel and his family making their way out towards Nicodemus. Nicodemus, by the way, it's a national park site, so we have the direct connection to that area.
And this would be what a dwelling would look like for the soldiers?
The more accurate one would be over here.
Okay.
So let me show you something real quick. Obviously,
and shout out to the women.
This is so important, the experience of African-American women, and you can see it right here, including, unfortunately, people that were expelled as well, the wives and children, really, of African-American soldiers. So the Home for Colored Refugees, you can see there was a school that was established and operated by the American Missionary Association.
And that's on this site?
It's actually, it was across the highway, what we have called the US 27 today, a part of the Home for Colored Refugees. Affiliated, by the way, after the war with Berea College. We're deeply connected with Berea College.
Sounds like it.
John G. Fee, who was the founder of Berea College, he was at Camp Nelson, helped establish the Home for Colored Refugees. This really famous image here is looking down the row houses at the Home for Colored Refugees. There were 97 duplex cottages.
Wow.
Family cottages, you can see there are women, there are children, there are gardens in front, 97 of them. And this is basically like a freedman's village in many ways. And this one kind of represents one of those 97 cottages.
Okay. So this is what you said would be more accurate.
Yeah, more accurate. And by, the spring and summer of 65, when the Army changes policy about allowing refugees to come into places like Camp Nelson or military bases, there are over 3,000 refugees at Camp Nelson. It's a dramatic number.
Man.
There's a lot here, right?
It's a lot.
Yeah, and I want to show you into this next room, actually.
And who's this person?
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry.
John Booker.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
There is a post-war community established formerly at the Home for Colored Refugees. The majority of Black refugees will move on, going all the way up to Ohio and other places.
Okay.
But yeah, there are a few dozen that kind of established a community is called Ariel. We now know it as the Hall community. There are still descendants connected and living there, just a few.
Okay.
But yeah, there was a school there. They called it Ariel Academy. As you can see, there were churches. There was about 25 households. There were Gabriel Burdett, former soldier, who was also like connected to Berea College as well. So this continues to go on. Yeah, there's people creating music related to their experience. There was also the E.J. Curley Distillery, which employed black and white Kentuckians, including former USCT soldiers. So there's a lot here.
Yeah.
And for us, one of the most important aspects of Camp Nelson is archaeology. So this was the archaeology that had been done, surveyed and excavations by the county over the past 30 or so years, including the original refugee camp. This is before the Home for Colored Refugees. And if you can go in closely there.
There's a comb.
Yes, and can you read it for
burned artifacts, glass and rubber comb.
Yes, what's really important about that is when the refugees were final expulsion in November of 1864, there was an order to basically gather up their living shacks, tents, whatever, and set it on fire.
So that's why it's burned.
So they would not come back. And that was confirmed by archaeology. So think about that. We've got a burnt comb, but burned glass. Like imagine how hot that has to be. They found, the archaeologist who's become a close friend of mine, found a lot of nails, more nails than you'd expect for one building. That's because everything was gathered up.
Yep.
So, and you've got this silver half dime, which is also burned as well. Like that's...
When they said burn it, they meant burn it.
When they said burn it, they absolutely meant it. So...
And now see right here where it says there is a WPA narrative. Every one of my children wears a silver dime on a string around their leg to keep off the witch's spell.
That's pretty cool, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then you see this button with the inscribed X, the West African Bakongo symbol of the universe. So obviously there is still cultural ties and heritage to Africa.
Yeah.
Even generations after, the transatlantic slave trade and enslavement. So,
for sure.
But yeah, this is a part of...
this is dope. So all of this was found here on this side.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a mix, so there includes the prison here, what people were eating. It includes some of the fortifications, including the one that was rebuilt by the county. And we have been restoring it as well.
Yeah. And
some of the other structures that were here as well.
Were there any iron furnaces near here?
No iron furnaces at Camp Nelson.
Okay, so they would be getting the materials from elsewhere.
Absolutely. But, one of the coolest things is there was actually a photography studio here. About 3 of them, we believe. And this gentleman, at an older age, but apparently he was in his early 20s, CJ Young from Lexington. And he also did stenciling as well. So the men could decorate their haversacks and property and things like that.
Yeah.
And any archaeologist it was trash. He would make a mistake, crumple it up and throw it on the ground. So they found a lot of trash here.
Yeah.
History trash.
There
we
you
like
go.
that stuff.
Which is still relevant today, right?
Yes.
It works.
I guess with that, we can go outside.
Yeah, let's go outside for a little bit. All right.
Yeah, so welcome to the park, my friend. As I mentioned, at the end of the Civil War, Camp Nelson was over 4,000 acres, 300 structures, including the Home for Colored Refugees. Today, a part of the national park, we manage about 465 acres, most of it on what we call kind of the main camp area along the fortification line. You came in and saw the historic White House. That's the only surviving structure from the Civil War era. I want to show you something real quick, and then we can kind of span to the landscape here. We've got this reconstructed barracks here, which is really, really cool. And what I love about this, it's kind of a mixed space for us. We use it for public meetings, park meetings, public presentations, and things like that. This has all been done by us, our staff, over the past 4 years, and it's
locked.
That's why I got a key, right?
There you go. National Park Service, it's so important to save our parks.
Yeah.
We need the funding.
So check this out. This is really cool. Individual bios of soldiers that were here, and we selected soldiers that we had the images of. So, these are like replica items, but these are personal items. And likely William Wright probably holding the Bible in his hand at the 114th. Very high quality uniforms. And so we want to give people a visual of who these people are.
Do y'all do reenactments?
Oh, yeah, we do living history events.
Living
yeah,
history?
We've got stuff coming up this summer as well. So please check out our schedule. But yeah, this is one of my favorite spaces.
This is nice.
And we've got an interactive exhibit coming in here as well. And so, yeah, so on this side, we've got U.S. color troops. For the women perspective, there were African-American women are trying to find a space at Camp Nelson. So they'll become washerwomen, they'll become cooks. They're just finding ways to support themselves and their families.
Of course.
So that's a part of it as well, which is really, really cool.
Post-emancipation, what were those stories like for people in this specific community?
It was
Nicholasville.
It was very, very difficult, and we're starting to, as I said, we're doing like the 160th of Camp Nelson right now. So 1865, believe it or not, by the summer '65, this place will start to, the Army will be in the process of shutting this down. And I think this is kind of the paradox of this. Unfortunately, the Freedmen's Bureau is assigned with shutting Camp Nelson down. And the gentleman that's in charge of this area, Tennessee and Kentucky, his last name is Fisk. Think about Fisk University. It's named after him. And he understands the importance of this place. And he keeps on saying, we have to do this with the utmost humanity.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be pretty tragic.
I know where this is.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Yep, been there.
And we know the gentleman, the sculptor Ed Hamilton. He'll be the keynote speaker at our Freedom Day Festival on June 21st, 2025. We're calling it the Freedom Day Festival. In late June of 1865, African-American soldiers, refugees, their families, they actually organized an Independence Day celebration at Camp Nelson on July 4th. So it features like military music and marching and parades and also food. Imagine that, these former enslaved people contributing the little money they have to have this Freedom Day celebration.
Yeah.
And we are going to make it more, less historic this year. So we're going to have music, we're going to have food. We're also going to commemorate that we're a part of the Charles Young Memorial Historic Corridor, which starts at Camp Nelson, where the southern terminus goes all the way up to his birthplace in Mays Lick, and actually goes across the river in Ohio and ends at the Charles Young Buffalo Soldiers National Monument in Xenia, Ohio, which is another national park site as well. So, and if you come back or you come visit us for the first time, by the end of the summer, we're going to have a brand new exhibit in here. It will have an interactive touchscreen with like maps. You're going to see where enslaved people are coming to when they enlist in these recruitment centers.
Wow, that's very comprehensive.
Yeah, it's coming together. We'll have like this 4-screen display that will have images and video of footage that we've put together, and very, very excited for that. And one perspective that I think you often forget, and this shows the complexity of the Civil War, especially in the South, is what about white Southerners and their connections to the Union, right? And so one thing that's often kind of forgotten about is there's a lot of Southerners who are actually pro-Union. And we see that at Camp Nelson. There are 7 white regiments organized here. There's Kentucky regiments and also East Tennessee regiments. So, and that's one of the reasons why
East Tennessee wasn't as vile as other areas.
Well, it was, think about the mountainous landscape there, right? Think about Andrew Johnson, who, by the way, is the only U.S. senator from a state that secedes from the Union that stays loyal. He becomes obviously the vice president and later president after Lincoln is killed. He's the most, I guess, well-known and prominent pro-unionist. And so you've got men from Tennessee like James Lauderdale. He comes from East Tennessee, and he makes his way up to Camp Nelson and joins the Army here.
Any Underground Railroad activity in Nicholasville that you know of?
I don't know all the details, but apparently there are places throughout the Central Bluegrass where this happened, which makes sense because you're on your way up north, right? So absolutely. I know. I believe I've heard there was some in Nicholasville, and then the largest area would have been Lexington, which makes a lot, of sense as well.
Okay.
So yeah, come on out. This is here for y'all as well. This is a pretty cool space, right?
Yeah,
and it continues to evolve as well.
Yeah.
And we want to.
And these are some of the white counterparts.
Yes, absolutely. Like this gentleman, he's with the 8th Tennessee Cav. As I mentioned, there are There are 7 white regiments recruited and trained here, including East Tennessee soldiers.
Yep, I know where that's at. Washington County.
Yes, indeed. Come on out.
Oh,
And then we'll just do kind of a panorama to conclude. I know you got to head up to Louisville.
yeah.
So,
About how far am I?
you're about
An
hour and a half-ish.
Yeah, I gotta be there at 11.
So if you span out here, you can see the landscape. You'll see there's the reconstructed fortification there.
Yeah.
And this is looking east. And just north of us, come on out a little bit further here, my friend.
Let's do it.
You can see kind of the rise in the ground there. Those are the remnant fortifications. Those were built by enslaved African Americans impressed by the Army, as I mentioned.
Impressed.
So think about this. There is still a physical connection to the enslaved people that were here, that's still on the ground 160 years later, which I think is truly incredible, right? So if you look at
any graves,
yes,
that are on
actually,
this site?
yes, absolutely, and just south of us actually is Camp Nelson National Cemetery.
Yeah, I saw that sign.
Which is now managed by the Department of Veteran Affairs. There's a huge Civil War section, and during the Civil War, it was known as Graveyard Number 2. So there are actually soldiers and civilians employed by the Army who were buried there. There are 837 U.S. colored troops. So a huge number. Obviously, the majority of them joined the Army at Camp Nelson.
Yeah.
And right through the field there, there's a memorial obelisk for Graveyard Number 1. And that is the final resting place till this day of black and white refugees. And they are still underneath the ground there. So this is a refugee site, right?
Yeah.
63, 64, 65. The soldiers were buried there as well, both black and white. The soldiers were disinterred and moved to the new National Cemetery after the war. We do a lot of programming out there because it's a very sacred, powerful space, right?
And this is just beautiful. This landscape
is.
just beautiful.
We're in the central bluegrass. It's hard to believe that Lexington is just up the road here, right? And this place has a lot of meaning for a lot of people, as I mentioned. We've got descendants that come out here all the time that reach out to us, and one of them that lives where the home for colored refugees used to be. He calls this hallowed ground, and his family is still in this area 160 years later.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm a son of war refugees from Vietnam, and so when I think about my parents and their journey into the United States from Vietnam, and I'm at Camp Nelson, right? And we've got people that are coming from all over the place, from East Tennessee, from different parts of Kentucky. They're either escaping occupation or the war, they're escaping slavery, and they're still fine, and they're making their way to places like Camp Nelson, right? And so as a son of refugees, the refugee experience is deeply personal, and that's why I find a lot of meaning at a place like Camp Nelson.
Most definitely. Up here is the White House.
Yes.
So my car is up there. So brother, if you don't mind walking me to my car.
Yeah, of course.
And us going over the White House, because that is the only remaining original structure on the site, right?
Yeah, in the 1850s, and it's called the Oliver Perry House, and it was just a civilian structure. The Perry family owned the land out here.
There's Perry County, which is in Hazard.
Yeah, I don't think there's a connection here.
Okay.
And the Army will come in here and basically confiscate it and use it for officers' quarters. And it's a very prominent structure, as I mentioned. People drive by it every day.
Yeah.
It's been through a couple different renovations when it was managed by the county. It's currently closed. It's in pretty rough shape right now.
Okay. The outside looks good.
Yeah, we actually replaced a lot of the siding and painted the walls. Painted it a couple years ago. There's like stabilization and foundational issues.
Gotcha.
We've got something called the Historic Structures Report, which is complete now, and which tells us a full history of the property from 1850s all the way up to the 1990s, and now part of the Park Service. But it also has recommendations about how we should rehabilitate and renovate the space.
Sweet.
Which obviously will cost quite a bit of money. And our goal is to reopen this to the public, especially the first floor, because that's where the officers basically had their spaces and offices and things like that.
Okay.
So it's quite the structure.
And this is it.
This is it. Yeah, obviously you can see some kind of modern additions to it.
Yes.
But, you know, we've got really cool historic images. And that's one of the things that we use a lot here. You know, Camp Nelson was a semi-permanent base. So we have over 40 historic images of Camp Nelson.
Wow.
So check this out.
Okay.
That's a photo of it at the end of the war.
Wow. Did this ever serve as a site for the Freedmen's Bureau?
No, no.
Was it ever housed here?
No, it was actually the quartermaster of the department who, you know, basically supplying the Army here. And the big name we have with the quartermaster of the department, by the way, there's Civil War graffiti of him in here. He signed the wall a couple of times. Theron Hall, he was the chief quartermaster here, supplying the Army. He was one of the officers, by the way, that was so upset by the November '64 expulsion. He writes about it under a pseudonym called Humanitas, and he just tells this heartbreaking account of what's happening to these refugees here. And then after the expulsion, when the Home for Colored Refugees is established, he's appointed as the superintendent for the Home for Colored Refugees. So he went from here to his new office where the Home for Colored Refugees was.
Now, this house being built in the mid-1850s, obviously that was prior to the Civil War. So this was a former was this a former plantation?
Yeah, there was
prior to?
Yeah, in 1860, the property included over 20 enslaved people.
Okay.
We believe at least one joined the U.S. colored troops here at Camp Nelson. Oh, yeah.
So you all see that right there. Man, so even though this was impromptu, it was still impactful.
Yes, always.
Always is. Whenever, let me get some good lighting. You know, this melanin gets dark in some spots. Okay, here we go. So even though this was impromptu, it was still great. I wish I had more time. But, you know, I always ask people, Steve, and you know, you've been following me. We've been communicating frequently. Your why.
Yeah.
Right? Like, do you mind telling us your why? Why are you so, I mean, you left D.C. to come down south, right, with us Bamas. That's what people call us, right? Slower pace.
Sure.
But you just love this stuff. You live and breathe it every day just like I do. So can you tell us your why?
Well, you know, one of the things I tell our staff is when visitors come out here, I want us to answer the question why, for them to understand why. Like, why was this site important during the Civil War? And that, you heard, there's a lot that happened here.
For sure.
And why is it worth us preserving today as a national park site? Why is it nationally significant? Why is it worth all of us, our federal tax dollars? Why is it worth preserving this site? And it's the living legacy of emancipation, right? And what it means for people to self-determine their future despite the circumstances. And so I think it's quite humbling. And I think it's our duty to share these perspectives and stories of liberation, of self-determination, again, of triumph and tragedy, right? That's really the story of us as people, of us as a country. And it's just a privilege to be here. So as I mentioned, you know, I get this question a lot, or we hear often from visitors who are descendants. And then my personal connection to a civil war is the Vietnamese Civil War. Yep. So I kind of throw people off because I want them thinking a little bit. I'm like, yeah, my family served with the South. And they're like, what? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, South Vietnam. I'm like, oh, that makes sense, right? So, you know, my family lived through a civil war, right? And
we talked about that during the
we talked about that, right? And so that's kind of why I got deeply connected and interested in the Civil War, is I wanted to understand my family's own experience of experiencing the Civil War, being displaced and becoming refugees and making a new life. And yeah, you know, I grew up in a Vietnamese community, a refugee community in Denver, right? And it's really kind of molded the person I am today, the historian I am. And yeah, I wasn't planning to leave DC. A lot of my friends were like, you're not leaving DC. But I'm here because of Camp Nelson and the stories that are here. And it's I think it truly is my job, our job, to amplify these people's experiences. These perspectives have always been here. And some of them were heard, some of them were silenced. And it's our job to share these with everyone.
Most definitely. Well, listen, you all heard it first, straight from Steve. It was great finally laying eyes on him outside of the computer or telephones.
I forgot that we never met in person.
This is the first time in person. Yeah. But you've met all my friends.
That's right.
Joe came.
Yeah,
right?
Joseph McGill and the Slave and Cheney McKnight was here.
Cheney,
so,
and so many others. Rachel.
Yeah, that's right.
Did Rachel come here?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Okay, no, she didn't come. Rachel Finch. But listen, this is another episode.
Rachel has been here. Rachel of course.
Okay. So this is another episode of History Before Us here live and direct at Camp Nelson. If you like this type of content, like I always tell you, please subscribe and share. Peace and blessings.